I believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear them. So come with me as we take a walk down Fascination Street. Welcome back, Streetwalkers. This episode is with Derek Hynes. I met Derek over Instagram, and he has a plethora of what I would consider fascinating stories. So in this episode, he calls me from Ireland. We talk about some of the really cool people he's gotten to meet and hang out with, some of the cool people he has ended up befriending, and some of the cool adventures he's got to go on because of his love of books and his love of meeting people. We talk about Marilyn Monroe, Stephen King, John Connolly, Chuck Palahniuk. We even talk about a few previous guests of this show. One of the things that Derek and I have in common is that we both got to have lunch with previous guest of this show, John Piricello. So that was quite a coincidence considering this guy lives completely on the other side of the world. This was recorded during all the self-distancing due to the coronavirus outbreak. So if that is over by now, woohoo. If not, damn it. But either way, this is my conversation with Derek Hynes. Yeah, talk to me, yeah. Welcome to Fascination Street Podcast, Derek Hynes. How you doing today, Derek?
I'm good. Thanks, Steve.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. Now, over here where I am, it is 10 o'clock in the morning. What time is it where you are?
3 o'clock in the afternoon.
And where are you?
I'm in the small town in the west of Ireland, and it's surprisingly sunny today.
In the west of Ireland. Wow. Oh, so you said surprisingly sunny because it's always dreary and cloudy and rainy and stuff there, right?
Yeah, usually. But we kind of like that. We're happy when we're miserable, so the weather suits us.
So where were you born and raised, Derek?
I was born in Tuam, County Galway. It's like a town of 8,000 people, about 20 miles from the Atlantic Ocean and 20 miles from Galway City, which Galway City actually got voted the friendliest city in the world. Don't know how they measure that up, but that's their claim to fame.
Wow. And how far away is that from where you are now?
Oh, 20 miles away.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What made you move 20 miles away?
Oh, no, I was born in Tuam. This is my town.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Very nice. So, I'm not even sure how we found each other. I know it was on Instagram, but I don't even remember how. But I remember seeing a picture that you had posted, and in the picture, if you looked closely, there was a female head in like a vase. And I think you had mentioned Laura Palmer or Twin Peaks or something like that. And I was like, what is with that head in the vase, bro? And you were like, that's Laura Palmer.
Yep.
So I guess, why did you post that picture? Do you have a fascination with Twin Peaks?
Oh, yeah. I'm a huge Twin Peaks fan. And it's a funny one because I watched Twin Peaks first when it came on television when I was about 12. When you're 12 years old, you've nothing else really to measure it up with. But I knew I was watching something special. So it was not bad parenting, really. I just snuck a few looks at Twin Peaks. And it came on television again when I was 17. And I really appreciated it then. And I'm more a book person than a movie or a TV show person. But Twin Peaks is my ultimate.
So you started watching it all the way back when it was originally airing.
Yeah, and that was at the time of none of these digiboxes, so you had to be in front of the television at the right time. Even to record it, you had to have the right channel, and then you had to guard the television so nobody changed the channel on you.
That's right. It was true appointment television back then.
Yeah.
None of this on demand whenever you feel like it, wherever you feel like it. You could watch it on your phone driving down the street. None of that nonsense.
None of this instant gratification with downloading every series in one go.
That's right. Yeah, and you didn't get to watch all of them back to back and binge them either. You had to wait a week.
Yeah, sometimes the anticipation would kill you.
Yeah, and then sometimes you'd have to wait a couple of weeks, they'd take a little break or something or whatever. There'd be, I don't know, soccer playoffs or something, so you'd have to wait until that was over before your show would come back.
Yeah.
And then you had that long summer pause between seasons.
Yep.
None of this, I'm going to watch this season 1 finale now and then in soon as it's over, watch the season 2 premiere. None of that nonsense.
Nope.
So what about Twin Peaks made you love it so much?
I don't know exactly. It just kind of, even at 12, I knew it was different. And it just something that struck me with it. It was that craziness. And I'm a big reader and I'm a big horror fan. And it was a mix of everything. It was like Dallas, but with, a lot of supernatural things in it. It's one of those shows that you can watch it again and again and again, and people still don't know what exactly is going on. So you get your own interpretation of it. And David Lynch has always said that. He's like, your answer, what you get from it, is the right one. There's no skeleton key that says this is how it should be.
Nice. So how excited were you when you found out that they were bringing it back a couple years ago?
I was in disbelief at first. There was an internet rumor, because basically the internet is really made for cat videos and rumors. And the rumor came out that David Lynch was going to get the cast together for one episode. I got all excited, and then that fell apart. He actually put up a tweet. One of the iconic lines was, that gum you like is coming back in style. The whole Twin Peaks community erupted. When it did come back, we had the trailers, we had interviews, we had all these things. But I actually, because the time zones, it was starting at 3:00 in the morning. I waited up till 3 in the morning. I watched the starting credits and went, it's back. And then I went to bed because I couldn't appreciate it at 3:00 in the morning with work the next day. So it took a bit of willpower not to watch it all until the next evening.
That is hilarious. Actually, I think we have both had sort of the same experience with regard to one of the people on that. One of the previous guests on this show is John Piricello, who was on the newer seasons of Twin Peaks, and I interviewed him over lunch. And because it was one of the first ones that I recorded, I think, and it was, sort of in a loud restaurant over lunch, it probably wasn't the idealist place for that interview because the audio is not the best, but I couldn't pass it up. So for all of you who went back and listened to that, or who are going back to listen to that, I apologize for the audio, but it's worth it. Super cool dude. But Derek, you got to have lunch with him, right? Also?
I did. John Piricello was wonderful. We're going back now to 3 years ago. I went to the Twin Peaks Festival in London for the first time, and I'd never been there before, and everyone knew each other. They're a wonderful group. There was like 500 people or something, and I was standing outside, and straight away a guy came over. Are you new? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, okay. And he brought me around and introduced me to everyone. But there's a guy there, one of the cast was standing outside, a guy called Sean Bulger, who I've got to know really well. I tiptoed over to him and I was like, can I say hello? And he's like, yeah, sure. I thought the Twin Peaks Festival is like a rock concert. You're not meant to see the people in public. You don't want to see Bono walking in with his guitar. You're meant to see them up on the stage. So seeing one of them standing outside was a little surreal. And I walked over and I said, can I say hello? And he's like, yeah, of course you can. And I brought a present to all of them. But I said to Sean, because I knew he was from Chicago and I have a link with Chicago, and I said to him, look, I got a present for all of you here, but your one relies on something. Are you Cubs or Sox fan? And of course, he gave me the politician's answer. He was like, when the Sox won the World Series, I celebrated. When the Cubs won the World Series, I celebrated. I'm like, he's really sitting on the fence. Yeah, it was a pure political answer. But we hit it off. And the first introduction I got to John Piricello was, Sean was telling me he's really good friends with him. And I said, God, he was an asshole in it. And he goes, I'm going to tell him. So he took a photo of me and he sent it to John Piricello. And he said, this is Derek from Ireland. He said Chad was such an asshole on the show. And the next day, Sean came out to me and he's like, John replied to you. And he read out the text message. And it's like, hey, thanks for the comments and all that. But it's actually Deputy Chad. Yeah, that was so cool. And John Piricello's the real cult character from Twin Peaks, because there is actually an Instagram page called The Cult of Chad, where people have badly photoshopped him onto different scenarios. And he pops up every now and then and goes, yeah, you got me a good one there.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, he's a really cool guy. So I got to know Sean. He says, add me on Facebook. He goes, if you're ever in LA, we'll do lunch. Which in most occasions means we won't do lunch, just, But he gave me a shout and he says, yeah, we're doing lunch tomorrow. That was in the farmers market in LA. I was excited. And he also told me that John was going, that Kimmy Robertson, who played Lucy, and she was in the original and the new ones and everything. She's old school Twin Peaks. But I kind of knew John would be cool. I kind of knew that Kimmy would be cool. And then we're standing outside the restaurant waiting for Kimmy, and this car pulls up. And it's a red-haired girl. It's Nicole Liberte. She played a part in the first episode. And I wasn't prepared for Nicole. I was kind of prepared for the others, and I get starstruck so easy. So I was like, guys, that's Nicole. And they were like, yeah. And I was like, Nicole. And they were like, yeah. And I was like, oh, damn, I'm not prepared. So we go into the farmer's market, and we all get in our food. You know, it's kind of tough in Hollywood. The best one with John Piracello was we were getting all this Brazilian meat on a plate, and he's like, Derek, I'll give you a tip. He's like, put some lettuce on your plate. And I was like, well, I'm on holiday, so I'm not going to eat lettuce. And he's like, no, put lettuce on your plate, because then when they weigh it, they're going to weigh it as half salad, half meat. It's cheaper. This is not the idea I had when I'm meeting people in Hollywood. So what happened was I got my food and I went down to the table, and I was sitting down beside Nicola Liberte waiting for the others. And I'm like, oh, your character Darla was really cool. Darla was brilliant. It was just like blurting out all this stuff, you know. And she was really, really nice. There's this thing, you know, if you're talking in front of people, if you're nervous, think about them. They're all in their underwear. Now, whoever came up with that is the worst advice ever. Because Nicole was actually in her underwear in the first episode, and I'm like, I'm really not comfortable with this. That does not work, you know, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but she got murdered in her underwear. And I'm like, I really don't know what to say here. So what happens then is the others come along, and John goes, oh, so you met Daria. Sorry, I'd been calling her Darla, and her character was actually Daria, and she didn't correct me. So all my great moments in life are embarrassing in the end, you know, because I called her the wrong name.
That is hilarious.
She was too polite to correct me. And they signed my Twin Peaks poster that I brought. They were just such wonderful. It was really, really cool. And I was just sitting there with Chad, John Piracello, Sean, Kimmy, and Nicole. And it's kind of surreal as, you know, when you grow up in Ireland and you're watching Twin Peaks at 12, Twin Peaks might as well be the other side of the moon. You know, it's like watching Beverly Hills 90210. Nobody has been there that you know.
Right.
You know, like Laura Palmer, the prom queen, might as well be Miss Universe. You're not going to meet her in the supermarket while she's going around getting a carton of milk. Fast forward 28 years, nearly, and I'm sitting with the cast. And it was unbelievable. And then it got more embarrassing.
How?
Will I tell you that one?
Tell me.
Oh, God, this is awful. So we have our lunch, and Sean says to me, he's like, can you do me a favor? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, come on. And I'm like, this sounds serious. This is like a gangster movie. You know, I've always said that if Sean was to do a movie, if they remade Goodfellas, you know, he'd be brilliant in that because he looks really sharp in the suit. He makes a good gangster. So he's like, come on, come with me. And I'm walking outside and I'm like, you know, what's the payoff for having lunch with this cast? He sounds like he's going to ask me to kill somebody. And I'm like, I don't know, am I too comfortable with that? I mean, maybe dispose of a body, but I don't drive, and I don't know, does Uber offer that option? So I'm getting a bit nervous, and he's like, come on. So we go outside. He's like, I need a favor. I'm like, oh, this is how it is in all these movies. He takes out a piece of paper. I'm expecting it to be a photograph of somebody. You know, this is who I want you to take care of. And you know, take care as in I'm not going to mind them. And he takes out this piece of paper, and he hands it to me, and he's like, right, I got an audition in the afternoon, and you got to practice my lines with me. So I'm a little bit conscious about these kind of things. You know, I'm quite a shy person. I'm standing outside a restaurant in Hollywood with an actor practicing lines, and he's got all his highlighted, and he knows them off by heart. So I just got to read the other bits. So I'm reading them out. He's reading out his. It was only after the second time I realized I was reading out the directions as well.
What did he say?
One of them was points at crotch. And I was like, oh, God, I'm reading this out. You know, my whole life can be summarized as this will be funny in 10 years, maybe. But Sean I got to know really well. I was back in LA last year for my 40th birthday. And we met up and we went for lunch for my birthday. And then I was back again in the summer and we went to Musso and Frank for lunch. So he's actually a really cool friend, and I treat him as a friend now, not as an actor. So it's wonderful.
Very cool. What was the occasion that took you to LA the first time when you had lunch with all of them?
Well, originally, I was part of a group. I like to tell stories that start off with a kind of a crazy comment, and then I back it up. I was actually in a cult years ago. It wasn't an actual cult. It was all members of a fan club for Chuck Palahniuk, the author from Fight Club. And we all got to know each other online. A lot of people grew up on that website. People have gotten married from it. It's like in Fight Club where they all sing and all dance and thrash of the world. It was really cool. And so in 2008, I went to America for the first time, and I posted on the now defunct forum that I was going to visit America. And it started off with me having lunch with one of the guys, and I woke up the next morning, and on the forum, all these other people were like, I'm flying in from Chicago, I'm flying in from all over the place. So it ended up with 20 of us meeting up in New York. If New Yorkers ever want me to come over free of charge, the only time I was ever in New York, the Giants won the Super Bowl.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, that was 2008. When they beat the Patriots. I have no idea of American sports, really. We might get to that later. But, yeah, so it went over and we all hung out. And then one of the guys, Frank from Chicago, says, why don't you come out to Chicago? So I've been visiting Chicago for the last 12 years. And another friend of ours, Mike Gonzalez, invited me out to LA. So I went out and I stayed with him. And I've been to LA like 4 or 5 times now. So it's all through Chuck Palahniuk, and, it sounds really geeky, an internet forum, but it's been a huge part of my life.
It doesn't sound all that geeky. Sometimes that's how you become friends. That's why I'm friends with John Puricello. He used to be part of a podcast that I listened to, and I befriended him that way, and that's how I was able to go out and hang out with him. I've hung out with John a couple of times when I went out to LA, and it's all through, geeky internet stuff. So that's nothing to be ashamed of, dude. That's super dope. And now you got all these friends out of it.
Yep.
Hey, Streetwalkers. Here's a word from our sponsors.
Guess what, Streetwalkers? The gear is here. A bunch of you have been asking for quite some time, and now finally it's here. Head over to FascinationStreetPod.com and check out the gear tab. There, you'll find all kinds of FSP items to tickle your fancy. T-shirts, coffee mugs, sticker packs, pins, buttons, coasters, and my personal favorite, for just $5 you can get one of those weird little phone handle pop thingies. So head to FascinationStreetPod.com and show the world that you're proud to be a streetwalker. Special thanks to my good buddy Stephen O'Reilly from the Bar Star Podcast for these dope drum beats. Check out Steve's work at O'Reilly Drums on Instagram, or search Stephen O'Reilly on YouTube.
Let's get back into it.
So, what do you do for a living that you can afford to travel the world like that? Because I don't know how expensive it is to get from Ireland to America, but to get from America to Ireland, it's pretty damn expensive.
Yeah, well, we have a family business. We're actually 100 years in business this year.
Really?
Yeah, it started with my great-grandfather with the bakery. Then it was passed down through my grandfather. My parents still work there. There was a little bit of sadness yesterday because of this coronavirus that, for health reasons, we had to close the door for now. My parents are working in that business for my dad for over 50 years, my mum for over 40 years. They work together, they live together, they go on holidays together, so this social isolation shouldn't be too bad for them. But it was a little bit of sadness yesterday because of what's going on in the world. But for health reasons, we had to close the door. So we have a sweet shop there.
Like a candy store?
Yep, yeah, you say candy store. Because I remember the first time I was going to America, and the guy on the desk when we were doing immigration, and he was like, oh, they rattle off all these questions. And he's like, what do you do? And I was like, I work in a sweet shop. And he's like, what's that? And then I kind of thought, I was like, candy store. And I actually say candy store a lot more, especially online now, because for some reason my phone spell check doesn't recognize sweet shop, and it comes up as sweatshop, which is a whole different thing altogether.
It is.
Yeah. It really is.
Who knew there were sweatshops in Ireland?
Yeah, no. So a lot of my travel, like last year, I traveled an insane amount. But all it is I get cheap flights and I always stay in people's places, and it's wonderful. It's just me and the cat to feed. So it's beautiful that way.
Yeah, that does make it more affordable if you got less expenses. What's the name of this sweet shop? Give it a plug.
It's Hynes' Sweet Shop in Bishop Street, Tuam.
And that's Hynes?
Yep.
Sweet. What kind of stuff do you have there? Do y'all make candy?
No, we just buy it in now. But up till about 15 years ago, we had a bakery as well. Yeah, we were kind of famous for, my dad and the rest of them used to make really good eclairs and fantastic donuts. We were kind of known for that.
Why'd y'all stop making those?
It just got to a stage where, work was starting at 6 in the morning and finishing at 7 or 8. And, it was long hours and everything. And I think it's the same everywhere in the world that the likes of these big supermarkets kind of squeeze out, the smaller businesses. It's difficult to compete.
Yeah.
But we kept the sweet shop and it's fantastic,
Very cool. This is a little off topic, I guess, but what is the most popular sweet that you sell at that shop? What do you sell more of than anything else? I'm willing to bet it's something I've never heard of and we don't have over here.
Yeah, probably blue bonbons. Raspberry bonbons. I've never seen them in America.
What the hell is, I don't even know what that is, man.
They're like a small, chewy sweet with blue powder on them. They're raspberry. And there's also toffee ones, apple ones. There's all different ones, but the blue bonbons probably go the best. But American candy is awful.
Really? That's so funny because America seems to think our candy is better than everybody else's except maybe Switzerland, and that's all chocolate.
Yeah, the Swiss and the Belgians do really good chocolate.
So back to this, I guess, chat group you were a part of. You said Chuck Palahniuk?
Yeah, Chuck Palahniuk, the author from Fight Club.
Now, have you ever met him?
Oh, yes. This is another great story. I didn't prepare for this podcast, but I did go for a walk an hour ago, put in the headphones, and I thought, what's important to me? What are these random moments that are important to me? And probably my favorite one was just before I went to New York. A friend of mine, Barbara, from the group, she actually got an interview with Chuck Palahniuk when he was visiting Munich. And she asked me, did I want to come along to it? Now, at that time, my mum had an accident and she was in hospital and she knew how important it was for me to go see Chuck and all that. And in fairness, my friends chipped in and they all helped out. And, I flew to Germany to meet Chuck. And I walked into this 5-star hotel because I wanted to suss out, I knew exactly where I was going. And I strolled into the hotel and I sat at the bar and I had a coffee and I was chatting with the barman. And I was like, okay, I know where I am now. So I went for a walk. And like 3 hours later, I walk into the hotel and Chuck Palahniuk is sitting down giving an interview. I take a speed wobble because I'm starstruck as usual. And I sit up at the bar and the barman's like, what happened to you in the last few hours? I'm like, Chuck Palahniuk is sitting down there. And he's like, he's just a normal guy. He came up to get his drink or whatever. So my friend Barbara arrived. And then we got to interview him out in the garden of the hotel. And I was shaking so much because he's a hero of mine. I was drinking coffee with milk and with sugar. And I couldn't even hold the sugar spoon. I was shaking so much. So I just drank it black. And we sat with them. And we had 45 minutes. But he was such a cool guy. He just kept talking and talking. And his agent came along. He's like, Chuck, we've got to go to this event. And he was like, I'm really enjoying this. So eventually he gave in. And he said, you just hang around after the event and we'll meet up again. So we went to the event. And if anyone ever gets an opportunity to go to a Chuck Palahniuk event, it is not a guy standing up just reading a book. It's an experience. After the event, we went and we sat with them. And we were chatting away. And I said, do you mind signing a few things? But what happened was years ago, he used to reply to all his fan mail. Once a month or for a month every year, he used to reply to all his fan mail and he used to send people a box with silly stuff in it. And he'd actually reply to your letter personally. So he had sent me a squirrel saying, this is your power animal. Also a photo of him with Brad Pitt and Edward Norton outside the Scooby-Doo house.
Whoa.
Yeah, just him that signed it now. And all these little things. So I did the same for him. So I got him a John Connolly book and I got him a Father Ted DVD. And I got him like fridge magnets and pens and candy and stuff. And I put it all into the box. And of course, a photo of my cat Cujo, who is a legend on the forum. And you might recognize the name from the Stephen King novel. I gave him all this, and the first thing he picked out was a photo of Cujo. And he's like, "Who's that?" I'm like, "That's my cat." And he said, "He's really cool." And he's like, "You came from Ireland and you brought me all this stuff." So he signed all my books for myself and for my friends. One of my friends, Mike, wanted something special signed. I was like, "What exactly?" And he's like, "I want a pair of underpants signed by Chuck Palahniuk." Yeah, so I was kind of lucky the venue had emptied out then, because I didn't know how comfortable I'd be queuing up in front of like 500 people with a pair of underpants. So he signed the underpants, and my friend in exchange sent me a painting of Lindsay Lohan. That was the exchange. That's a whole other thing. And he signed everything. He signed a get well card for my mother, and he asked me for my address. And that Christmas, I got his new book, and I got a few other things, and another package, and it says Derek's Mam, and a Christmas tree ornament, and a card for her saying, "Dear Derek's Mammy, hope you're feeling better now." So that was really, really cool. And a card for Cujo as well with, "Dear Cujo, this is my dog Imp," and a photo of his dog. So he's a wonderful guy.
Very cool. A while back, you mentioned that you were an avid reader and a big horror fan, and then just a few moments ago, you dropped the name Stephen King as it relates to your kitty cat's name.
Yep.
Have you met Stephen King?
I have.
How is that possible? Nobody has ever met that guy.
He does exist. Oh, God. This is a long story. Do you want to hear it?
Do it, do it, do it.
Okay. It actually started in LA. Yeah, about 10 years ago. I was visiting LA. It was actually the first time I visited LA. My friend Mike, he said to me, "What do you want to do today?" And I'm a big fan of Marilyn Monroe. Not exactly her movies or how she looked or anything like that, but I love her story. I love that all the contradictions in it, that possibly the most sought after woman ever, died on her own when there was a party going on down the road. And, that she was a very complex person and treated badly and everything, So this day in question, my friend says, "Come on, what are we doing?" I bought a dozen roses and I went to Marilyn Monroe's grave in Westwood. I bought the flowers and I was sitting there, and I sent a text to a friend of mine, John Connolly. He's an author. He's a very good friend of mine. I sent him a text and says, "I'm in Hollywood." And he said, "Oh yeah, there's a bookstore called Mystery Pier in West Hollywood. You got to go there. It's extremely expensive. Just go in and tell them I sent you." So I went from the grave. I went to this bookstore, and Michael Caine has described this bookstore as the museum where you get to keep the exhibits. If you're extremely rich. So you walk in the door, and it's a father-son operation. And I walk in, and there's all these photos of Hollywood celebrities, like Johnny Depp is there wearing their T-shirt. You got Flea from, is it Red Hot Chili Peppers? You got all these, the mayor of LA, Matt Damon, all these huge celebrities. And I go in, and he's like, "What's your favorite book?" And personally, my favorite book is Leaving Las Vegas by John O'Brien. And he says, "Oh, I got a copy here." Not only was it signed by John O'Brien, it was also signed by Nicolas Cage and Julian Sands from the movie. It was $4,500.
Whoa.
Yeah. And I was like, guys, I work in a sweet shop. I don't own the sweet shop. I don't own a chain of them, And they said, "Well, who's your favorite author?" And I was like, "Stephen King." And they were like, "Well, we got 2 first editions of Stephen King. And one of them was Christine, which I didn't particularly like or hate, And he goes, "The other one is Cujo." So my friend Mike starts laughing. He goes, "What are you laughing at?" He says, "Derek named his cat Cujo." So they sold me the book. They gave me a good deal on it. It was the first edition. And I actually said to them, it was the first time I'd said, my dream in life is to meet Stephen King, and I will never meet Stephen King. I've given up, because like what you said, nobody meets Stephen King.
Nobody meets him.
No. So a week later, I'm in Chicago visiting my friends through Chuck Palahniuk as well. And I get an email from the Stephen King website saying that he's going to be in Paris 2 months to the day I bought the book. He hadn't been to Europe in so long. And even when he does things in America, he does them up on a stage. You don't get to meet him. So this was huge. So before I even left Chicago, I had booked a flight to Paris to go see him. So 2 months later, I fly to Paris. First of all, I got up on the Monday morning. I went to work. Then I got a lift to Galway, then I got bus to Dublin, couldn't sleep with all the excitement. So I arrive in Paris on a Tuesday afternoon, and a friend of mine from Strasbourg had booked a hotel for me near the venue. And there was no tickets or anything for it. It was first come, first served. So I was like, I am not going to miss out on the opportunity of meeting Stephen King. So I got there at 3:00 on the Tuesday afternoon. Everyone in the bookshop was like, oh yeah, he's here tomorrow, but we don't know much else. And I was like, okay. So this guy came over to me and he's like, well, actually, there's 2 people sitting outside already. So I was like, I went out to them. First guy was a French guy. The second guy was an Italian guy. I said, what's going on? And they were like, well, I'm number 1. He's 2. You can be number 3. So I was like, okay. So I sat with them. I'd been to France as a kid on holidays. France is hot during the summer. I didn't realize that Paris would be absolutely freezing cold in November because I'm an idiot. So I had a T-shirt and a jacket and I had 4 books with me. These other guys were well prepared. They looked like they could have climbed Everest. And I sat out with them at 3:00 on the Tuesday afternoon, and Stephen King wasn't going to be there till 1:00 on the Wednesday afternoon. So I got to know the guys, and it's that kind of thing when you have one thing in common with people, you get along. And we were all fans of Stephen King. So later on, some Italians started arriving. They were from the Stephen King website, or the Stephen King fan club initially. So they all knew each other from Facebook, but they'd never met. Then some French people came along. Then all these people just started arriving. And it was wonderful. We were all just chatting away. I didn't read a page of my book. And at 8:00 that night, a TV crew came along and they wanted to speak to the first 5 people in the queue. So I ended up on French TV being interviewed. And I don't speak French, but they let me speak in English. And I'm so camera shy. I've never looked at that clip. But my friend from Strasbourg sent me a text message and she was like, you're on French TV. And I'm like, I only got here a couple of hours ago. You know, I'm on French national TV. It was like that little clip at the end of the news that, oh, Stephen King is in town, here's his fans. So we queue up the whole night. We were sneaking off, getting coffees, coming back again. 8:00 the next morning, there was a huge, huge queue. People were arriving, the metro was emptying out all these people, and I got to know them. And the funny thing was, the first guy, the French guy, he says, oh, Derek, this is like after about, 15 hours of queuing with the guy. He's like, oh, just one thing. I was like, what? And he's like, my name is not Philippe. I'm like, I'm calling this guy Philippe for the last 15 hours. And he was too polite to, I think we've guessed by now I'm really bad with names.
What would have been hilarious is if he said, my name is not Philippe, it's Daria.
Yeah, I think there's a trend here, isn't there?
A little bit.
Yeah. So the next thing, they start putting up barriers. We were up at the very front of the barrier. And even then it hadn't sunk in that I was going to meet Stephen King until I was right in front of him. It was still a dream to me. I thought something's going to happen. He's going to cancel or whatever. It was still all very, very surreal. But 2.5 days without sleep will do that to you as well.
Sure. Plus, you got all that jet lag and those time differences.
Yeah, so I was queuing, and it was really funny because there was one French guy, a really nice guy, very, very quiet. But for the last hour, he developed a very high-pitched laugh, like a little girly laugh. Everyone was getting nervous and excited, and another TV crew came along, and they interviewed us. And my friend again texted me and was like, I saw you again on French TV. And she's like, did you really have to wear a Lindsay Lohan t-shirt? I love Lindsay Lohan, I'm sorry. There were 3 goddesses in the world, Joan of Arc, Marilyn Monroe, and Lindsay Lohan. And I stand by that. So I was wearing my Lucky Lindsay t-shirt. Eventually, the doors opened and the guy goes, we want the first 20 people. So we walked in. It was like what I could imagine is like being on the Oscars, because there was just TV crews, there was photographers, there was all these dignitaries, and they were all standing there in their suits, and we all walked in, the cameras were flashing and everything, and everyone says you have, 10 minutes of fame? I had about a minute. But we walked in, and I looked behind the desk where he was supposed to be, and there was a pile of books, and there was no Stephen King. And I tapped the guy in the shoulder and I was like, where is he? And he's like, he's right in front of you. He came out to shake hands with all the guys and hug all the girls. He said, I heard you've been waiting a long time. So he greeted all of us. And the security then had said, you got to go up to him with your book and you have it open. He signs it and you go. But I had a little trick up my sleeve. I had my first edition of Cujo. So I went up to him, thumb in the book, and I flipped it over. And before he put the pen on the page, he goes, "What's that?" And I was like, "Oh, that's a photo of my cat Cujo." And I said, "All I've ever wanted to do is thank you for all the amazing books and give you a photo of my cat." I said, "Would you bring it with you?" And he said, "Of course I will." There were no photographs allowed, with them. And that was my one kind of regret. So I got my book signed and I went outside. There was journalists coming up because we all had numbers and they wanted the lowest number possible. So they were coming up to people and they're like, "What number were you?" And they were like, "I was 80. And then they go, "Nah." And they come up to you and they're like, "What number are you?" I was like, "Number 3. "Okay, we want to talk to you." So I've probably been in certain publications that I don't even know about. It was amazing. So that was probably my finest moment. And about a week later, one of the crowd said to me, "Check out the publisher's website." So I went onto the website and there was a photo of me standing in front of Stephen King. And at that exact moment, he's smiling at the photo of Cujo. So I got my photo.
That is so cool.
And then I got invited to Italy by the Italians. So I went and met them for lunch in Milan. That's another city I've ticked off because of being a bookworm.
Wow, who would have thought that, back in the day, if somebody read a lot of books, that means they didn't leave their house.
Yeah.
But you're reading books and it's literally taking you all over the world. A lot of people read books because it's an escape, it's a vacation in the mind, but you turned them into actual vacations in reality. Well done, sir.
Thank you.
Good Lord, that makes me want to ask you, any other authors that you are friends with and hanging out with now?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's one other. John Connolly. He's an Irish author.
From Dublin, right?
Yeah, he's from Dublin, but he writes all his books. They're all based in America.
Yeah, it's like a private detective book, Charlie Parker or something, right?
Charlie Parker. Well done. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I went to a book event by him. It was about 15 years ago. He was doing one in Galway. I was a huge fan. And it was it was the first author I'd ever met. He breaks every stereotype as well, every image people have of him, because his books are quite dark. He's not like that at all, because all these author photos, you see them on the back of a book. They're even smaller than a passport photo. So you can't really gauge what they're like. So I was expecting a really tall, gaunt guy, just came out of his writing shed to meet the public. And I was queuing up, or I was in the bookstore. Next thing, this guy walks in and he's like, excuse me. And I was like, I feel like telling that guy to get to the back. He goes to the front and he goes, "I'm John Connolly." And I was like, I wasn't expecting this. But he was such a cool guy.
You're like, how old is that picture, man?
Yeah, well, it's a tiny passport kind of. I did read one before that someone said, if you're going to become an author, get your author photos done early. Not to digress, but Robert Grace?
No.
Well, Robert Grace he writes detective fiction in LA. There's kind of a joke in the community, the writing community, that he actually gets younger after every book. Yeah, his author photo. So they've nicknamed him the picture of Dorian Grace. So I went and I met John, and he's such a cool guy. And what I really like about him is that when you meet someone famous and when they take more of an interest in you than you do in them, you don't walk up to them and say, "You're brilliant, blah, blah, blah." They actually take an interest in you. And he was such a cool guy that the next year I went to another reading by him. It was monsoon weather in Galway. He had already done 2 bookshops. And the third bookshop, I couldn't blame anyone for not going out in that weather. And a lot of them had seen them in the other 2. So we ended up going down to the pub, myself and him and the staff. And we got on really well, and we kind of struck up a friendship. It's one of those things that I kind of value people and what they do in their spare time more than what they do for a living. So John, being an international best-selling author, he's a friend of mine. I treat him as a friend and not... the fact that he writes unbelievable books is a bonus. But so I've got to know him over the years. Also his partner, Jenny. I have to give her a shout out because she's just a wonderful person. I love when I go to the readings. I always go to them in Dublin now, or the events. She will introduce me as Derek is a big fan of John, and we're also big fans of Derek.
That's her name is Jenny Ridyard or something?
Ridyard.
Yeah.
And they co-wrote a few books together.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors.
Hey guys, if you're like me, quarantine or not, you and your family are looking for new things to do together that don't involve staring at a screen. I have the perfect solution. It's a new trivia game called You Know It, and it's a blast and you can try it for free. You Know It was created by John Sylvain, one of the hosts of the Nooner podcast on Kevin Smith's Smodcast podcast network. And since I'm a fan of that podcast, I signed up for an early copy when John launched his Kickstarter campaign. Really, I just wanted to be supportive, but my family and I played the game and we loved it. Days later, everybody kept saying how fun it was. It's a very simple game. The rules are even simpler than Trivial Pursuit, but there's a lot of strategy to it as well, and the questions are fun and interesting and sometimes hilarious. And all of the questions have two parts, so maybe you don't know the first part, but maybe you know the second part, or vice versa, like this one. What name is shared by a California NBA team and a California NHL team? The Kings. They're not all easy like that, but some of them are. There's wild cards and strategy and stealing and even consequences for getting an answer wrong. One of my favorite parts about this game is that there's 3 questions on each card, 3 rounds plus maybe a tiebreaker for each game. Like when me and my family played, there was 4 of us, and it took 45 minutes to an hour, and we only used 6 cards, and there's so many cards. We could play this game forever. Now, I'm not suggesting that you have to be drinking to play this game, but me and my family were, and I tell you what, it raises the fun level to 11. I highly recommend you try it, and you can do that for free by going to youknowitthegame.com, all one word, no spaces, and you can download and print a starter pack for free. There's also more cards available for science and sports, and even a special Generation Z pack. And if free isn't cheap enough for you, Streetwalkers can get 30% off on all other downloadable packs by using the discount code FSTREET at checkout. Once again, that's youknowitthegame.com, all one word, no spaces, and use the discount code FSTREET at checkout for 30% off all other downloadable packs. And if I'm being honest, Streetwalkers, I'm a little upset that I only got 1 copy of this game. My kids are adults, and they deserve a copy of this game so they can play with their friends too. Remember, the game is called You Know It, and it's a blast.
Let's get back into it. Let's get back into it.
I know John now about 15 years, and he probably did one of the nicest things that's ever been done for me. He named a character after me in his last book.
Oh, very cool. I love when that happens.
Yeah, and the anticipation was unbelievable. So he told me 2 years ago at the launch of his second last book, he's like, I named a character after you, but I had no more information. And one of the things I really like about him as well, he's another Twin Peaks fan. So when we mentioned earlier, when I always bring a present to authors, because it's just a way of showing gratitude, because I can buy a book for €10. They can work on it for years, and I'm going to read it in 2 days. So I get a really good deal out of it. So I always bring them a present. And a couple of years ago, when I was going to the Twin Peaks Festival, I said to John, are you a fan of Twin Peaks? And he's like, yeah. So he signed a copy of his book for the cast, but he signed them in character. So that was really cool.
That's super cool.
And they were really appreciative, because he wrote a biography of Stan Laurel. When I was giving them the book, one of them was to Hawk, which is Michael Horse, and he's like, oh, I'm a huge fan of Stan Laurel. So he was really happy about it. All of them were really happy about it. It's my way of saying thanks to the Twin Peaks cast, and also thanks to my friend John. And Sean Bulger is actually I think he's on book 8 now of the Charlie Parker series. He loves them.
That is so dope.
Yeah, it was this time last year. The book was coming out, and I couldn't get a copy until that morning. I think John had known that I would have probably polluted Facebook with it, giving everyone spoilers. Yeah. So I was on my way to the book launch, and I ran into my favorite bookstore in the city. I grabbed the book, and I was on the train, and I was like trying to read to the part where I was in it. And I was just picturing myself, because it's like a 2.5 hour journey. And I'm like, am I going to be this weirdo walking down the street in Dublin reading a book? Because I just have to get to this part. But with about 20 minutes left on the train journey. These 4 little old ladies got on. Every old lady in Ireland is called a bridie. That's what we call them. So these 4 bridies got on. They were probably going to bingo or something. They were sitting across from me, and I'm reading the book. And I just get to the part I'm in, and I ring my mother, and I'm like, Mom, I'm after finding a dead body. And then I hang up the phone, and you can see these 4 old ladies looking at me going, uh-oh. And I didn't try and clarify it for them, so I was lucky I wasn't met with the police when I got into the station. Yeah, so it was weird. The character was named after me. It was a policeman in Northumberland in England. So it was my name, but I had a few smart lines in it. But it was, it was weird reading your own name in a best-selling book.
It is weird. I am in 2 different books by 2 different authors, and in one of them, I am a cop. I'm sort of an asshole cop. And then the other one, I'm a football player in the Galactic Football League, out in where planets play other planets, American football.
No way.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. The Football League one is from author Scott Sigler, who does a lot of sci-fi horror. You'd probably like it. He's really good. He does a bunch of other stuff besides that football series, but that's the one I'm in. And then the other one where I'm a cop, he does crime fiction.
Yeah.
And his name is Seth Harwood, and he is a previous guest on my show a couple of times.
Brilliant. And actually, I've read Scott Sigler.
Oh, really?
And I'm writing down Seth Harwood right now.
Very cool. Nice. And a previous guest, also, his name is Doug Richardson. He writes a series of detective novels, and the detective is named Lucky Day, D-E-Y.
Yeah.
And he's written, I don't know, like 7 or 8 of them or something so far. But he is also the writer of the first Bad Boys movie with Will Smith and Martin Lawrence.
Mm.
And also he wrote Die Hard 2, like the second Die Hard movie. He's written a bunch of stuff. It's super nice, dude. So you might want to check out those books, too, because those are pretty good.
This goes back, I think, to the conversation we had when you got in touch with me. I got a little bit nervous because I did see the people you'd interviewed before. And one of them was Tim DeKay.
Yeah, that's a fairly recent one. Such a nice guy. As a matter of fact, the only reason that I was able to interview Tim DeKay was through that guy I was just talking about, Doug Richardson, the guy who wrote those books. They're friends, and Tim DeKay does the audiobooks for that series.
Wow. I'm a Tim DeKay fan anyways.
Who's not, man? That guy's awesome.
Carnival is the best TV show that David Lynch wasn't involved with. That is such an amazing TV show. I think actually, I don't know is it true or not, but I think the producers got death threats when they cancelled it.
Wow. I don't know. That didn't come up, but now I wish that I would have known that before. That's crazy.
And just to clarify, I was really upset, but I did not make death threats.
Just to clarify, I was mad, but that wasn't me.
Yeah, because I scrolled down through who you'd interviewed and I went, oh. And I remember I sent you a message and I said, can I just clarify, I'm a complete nobody.
Oh, knock it off. The premise is that everybody has a story and I'm fascinated to hear them, and that's the truth. And that's why I started the podcast, because I would meet people in my travels, and I'd strike up conversations, and I was just like, man, I wish I would have recorded that. Man, I wish I would have recorded that. Man, I wish I would have recorded that. And so finally I started recording that.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Do you want to hear a story about how my character finished up in the book?
I do want to hear that.
Okay, so back when I was 19, I moved to Maastricht in the Netherlands. And I lived there for 3 years. It was wonderful. I met some really, really good people there. And I hadn't gone back when I left there. I kind of had a mental block about going back. And about 2 years ago, one of my friends, Misha, he tagged me in a post and he said, David Lynch is doing an exhibition in Maastricht. And he goes, is it time to come back? And I was like, maybe, no, I don't know. Okay, so I bit the bullet and I went back to Maastricht. I was going back to Maastricht as a new person, but I wanted to see all my old friends. And in a way, it was kind of like I felt bad because I hadn't visited my friends. And I had always said one thing, that when I did go back to Maastricht, my one big regret was there was a family there, the Mussons, Mark, Valerie, Ellie and Boy, and the grandmother, Boma. Boma was my favourite, and she passed away about 10 years ago, and I couldn't go to the funeral. The Irish, we do Catholic guilt really well. So I actually felt bad. I couldn't go to the funeral. So I always said that when I went back to Maastricht, the first thing I'd do was go see Boma to her grave. I remember one of the last times I saw her when I lived there. She had no English, and I was very shy about speaking Dutch around my friends. So we probably got on really well because we couldn't understand each other. But she used to always say Derek is gek, which means Derek is silly, because I was silly at the time. But I remember like years ago, I think it was like her 80th birthday or something, and she came into the bar I worked in, the Irish bar, with her daughter Ellie, who was my friend's mother, and they had tea. And the first time they ever came into the bar, and the only time, they looked completely out of place. So I ran next door and I got her a Milka-Cow. You know the Milka chocolate?
Chocolate milk?
Yeah, the Milka-Cow. I think it's Swiss, and there's a cow with a purple and white.
Okay.
The guy next door sold me a Milka-Cow, the little teddy bear, and it was the time of the mad cow disease. So I went, yeah. So it was appropriate. So I gave her the box of chocolates and I gave her the Milka-Cow. And then I was saying, Boma, this cow has got mad cow disease. He thinks it's a duck. So I was making duck noises with the cow. And, that was probably my favorite memory of her. So I always said when I went back to Maastricht that I would go to her grave. That was the first thing I'd do. So just over a year ago, I went back and we had Christmas dinner. I used to always have Christmas dinner with the Mussons, but we had Christmas dinner a month early and it was a whole family there. And Mark has a new addition to the family, his partner Isabel and their kid Jerome. And they're just wonderful. I've always said to Isabel and Jerome, I'm not getting a photo with those two. And the reason I'm not getting a photo with those two is if I get a photo with those two, I don't have a reason to go back again. So if I don't get a photo, you'll see me again because they're my two favorites.
Oh.
Yeah. So we had our Christmas dinner and the next day, Valerie, Mark's sister, picked me up and she says, we'll go to the David Lynch exhibition. I said, no, I want to go see Boma first. So I went to her grave and I apologized, for missing the funeral and all that. And so I wondered if she still remember me. So after that, we went to Mark's parents' place and they had photos of Boma for me. And we were sitting around talking, and Ellie said to me, she says, Derek, do you remember the Milka-Cow? And I was like, yeah. And they said, well, when Boma passed away, they went into a room and she had the Milka-Cow on her bedside table.
Oh, Derek.
So that was a nice moment, But basically, I was going around to all my friends and seeing them again. And, a real test of friendship is if you haven't seen someone in so long and they just behaved like they hadn't seen me in a week. So I had a list of people to see and it was like one by one. I saw them and then I went back again. I went back again 2 months later. The third time I went back, I met up with a few different people and all that. And there was one person I needed to apologize to. And I thought I'd never make the apology. But I said, okay, I'm going to do this. So I met up with a friend. I knew my apology was going to be accepted, but there was still reason to be nervous because I'm naturally nervous, and you'll probably hear that coming through on the podcast. But there was one friend, and I said to them, I owe you an apology. And they said, okay. I said, here's your apology. I handed them the book I'm in. They were looking at me, and it's like, what's this? I was like, okay, read this paragraph. So they read the paragraph, and they're like, you're a policeman. I'm like, yeah, there's a character named after me. They're like, I want a copy of this book. I'm like, hold on. I said, this is special delivery from John Connolly. Goes to the front of the book and it says, Derek is a character in this book for how long remains to be seen. Happy to have helped. I go, what does that mean? I'm like, go to the end of the book. Read that paragraph. I said, this is my apology. Here you go. They read it. You got shot. I'm like, yeah, I got shot twice. I know someone that'll be happy about that. And that was my apology, and they were delighted with it. So I apologized to someone after 17 years through a best-selling book. So I'm done saying sorry now, and I'm done getting books signed. I can't top that.
That's a great way to apologize to somebody. That's really cool. Derek, where can people find you on social media?
I'm on Instagram. I don't really use Instagram that much because I'm not a complete narcissist, but I need to be more active on that. And I'm also on Facebook and I'm on Twitter. Just the name Derek Hynes, I think, works for all of them. Yeah, I think that's it.
Gotcha. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Everybody go check him out. Follow him. Say hi.
Yeah.
Now, Derek, as we're heading out, is there anything that we didn't talk about or I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about?
I have one more story from LA. You want to hear it?
Do it.
For personal reasons, about 9 years ago, I started to behave myself a bit better, and I thought my life was going to get boring. I don't know what your opinion on LA is, but I love the fakeness because I don't live there. And I love baffling people by being normal, because you meet people in LA and they're like, what do you do? And I'm like, I work in a sweet shop. And they're like, no, are you not a screenwriter? Are you not an actor? I'm like, I work in a sweet shop. And they can't get their head around it because everyone wants to be something in LA. I've had the opportunity to meet a few celebrities. And then I've also had an opportunity through other friends to spend time with ex-convicts. And to be honest, I prefer the ex-convicts because they're more honest. I love that about it, that in the afternoon you can meet a couple of celebrities. And I think my favorite one was I met up with some friends and I'm sitting in a room with a guy, and I've got tattoos, and they're bad tattoos. They look like they were done in jail. But I'm sitting beside a guy and he goes to me, nice tats, where'd you get them done? And I'm like, Ireland. Where'd you get yours done? And he's like, San Quentin. I'm like, damn. So I go to my friend and I'm like, Anthony, I'm like, what's the teardrop mean? Oh yeah, he killed someone. I'm like, okay. So I love the kind of microcosm of life in LA, that you can go from hanging around with A-listers to hanging out with the other side of society. And I just love that about it.
It is pretty crazy. There's some super awesome people there, but also there's some people that you might not want to run into in a dark alley.
Yeah. Well, I did a little tour to South Central during the day.
Oh, during the day? Why is that?
Yeah. It was pretty scary during the day as it was. And I don't think we even went to the really bad part, thankfully.
Yeah, I bet. Well, Derek Hynes from Ireland, thank you so much for taking the time today, man. Thank you for making the time. I understand that your store is closed, but still, you could have been doing anything, and you chose to hang out with me and let us all get to know you a little bit better on Fascination Street, man. I really appreciate that.
And thanks yourself, Steve. It was a pleasure.
And I will talk to you later, buddy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye, man.
Bye.
As always, thanks for listening, Streetwalkers. And don't forget, follow the show on Twitter at FascinationSTPD, on Instagram at Fascination Street Pod. Follow the podcast page on Facebook at Fascination Street Podcast. And of course, you can always email me at fascinationstreetpod@gmail.com. And if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button and rate us on iTunes. Opening music is the song Magnolia from the 2014 album Intransigence, used with permission from Douglas Miles Clark. Closing music is Apollo from the 2001 album Into the Known by the band Sapphire. Thanks for hanging out with us and getting to know a little bit about our guest. We'll see you next time on Fascination Street.